Good afternoon, all. Thank you, Realty Plus, for organizing this. A very warm welcome to all speakers and the audience. It's an interesting discussion for us on warehousing. I think there is no doubt Indian warehousing industry, has become very relevant in the overall real estate space in India, and possibly, on the way to become not only number one or the biggest, but also the smartest in the world. So I think along with government policies to nurture India as a global manufacturing hub, or a COVID-19 pandemic induced e-commerce boom, and the rise of tier 2 and tier 3 cities increase the demand for overall quality warehousing spaces, especially grade A, with the latest technology innovations. So the investment in warehousing has constantly gained momentum, and more importantly bounced back very quicker once the COVID, stabilized. I think it will be interesting to discuss all these points, what is driving warehousing business in next few years, newer markets, technology, sustainability of assets, returns, exit consideration. I think we can have the discussion very free flowing. We may agree to disagree on various discussions points. To start with, maybe Rajat, I can get you in and
Sure.
to start with the key drivers, what is driving the warehousing business for next 3 to 5 years time. Today we have seen consumption, e-commerce related, driven demand. But another thrust which is now coming is on the manufacturing side, and
Right.
looking away from China. And manufacturing will, for a long term, will remain the backbone, of warehousing from a long term sustainability perspective. So, what your thoughts, on the manufacturing, and specifically, with the thrust on self-reliance, Make in India, and countries looking beyond China for manufacturing?
Right. So we at ESR always think that a business is clearly divided into two pillars. There is everything which is driven by consumption. You mentioned e-commerce, you mentioned online retail, offline retail, and then there is industrial, which is largely manufacturing, light assembly. These are just two completely separate pillars. At times, even the products we offer to these two, let's say tenant categories is separate. And both of them need to sustain, in the long run at a large scale for India warehousing business to really be successful in the next 5-7 years. There's been a lot of hype about investment outflow from China and being redirected into India. Have we actually seen that in the last 12-18 months? I think my personal experience suggests not so much. I think it's been more hype and less truth. Some of the benefits China had with respect to governance, with respect to scale, with respect to policies. Let's say even something as simple as ability to hire and fire labor isn't as easily replicatable in India. So we'd see a long time before we see, let's say, an en masse movement of Chinese manufacturers moving into India. Although I think we've seen some green shoots, and hopefully they should pick up very soon. In limited states, I'd say we've seen a lot of activity pick up on the manufacturing side in Tamil Nadu, for example. I mean, kudos to the Tamil Nadu government for being so proactive in welcoming manufacturers. We've seen a lot of activity in Maharashtra, some in Telangana, some in I'd say even Karnataka. So a lot of, I'd say, activity in the southern belt, not so much in north and west right now. And even within manufacturing, I think limited sectors are, let's say, driving up new demand. Renewable energy, for example, is one where we see a massive thrust. There are tons and tons of, let's say, large-scale wind and solar manufacturing entities who want to start operations in India. These entities want to take up space as much as, in a single shot, they take up anywhere between 500,000 square feet to 2-3 million square feet space, because they set up these, really large-scale industries on these sites. And a lot of government incentives available in India are incentivizing these guys, I think, more in terms of, I'd say, expansion than relocation from China to come in here and set up new facilities. So renewable energy also, I see a lot of activity on the telecom side, electronics, engineering. I think these are the sectors that will drive new demand from a manufacturing side. Traditionally, it used to be a lot more of oil and gas, automobile, auto ancillary. That has, I think, definitely slowed down in the last couple of years.
Thanks, Rajat. And yes, to your point that in last 12 to 18 months time, a lot has been spoken about relocation or expansion, but we haven't seen. But we talk about renewables, or even some specific government, state governments like Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, you mentioned specifically. Yes, if there's a good calibration and collaboration between central and state governments to attract more investments, possibly it can definitely go to a next level from that perspective. With that one, Mr. Narayan, if you can get in, and from your perspective, how are you seeing this from a global perspective and relating that to an Indian on a manufacturing thrust, more demand from China and maybe other countries also coming to India?
Yeah, so I do see that there would be an increased manufacturing side of demand coming in. Not so much as Rajat also mentioned, so much on the traditional automobile, auto parts, and things like that. Maybe they will come back later, but immediately, at least for the next few years, what we are looking at is also substantially, what is being the focus of the government also, because of the scheme that the government has, PLI scheme that the government has. And if you see people, international companies who have tied up, who have come under that scheme, are your traditional ICT side of it, telecom components, IT components, hardwares, renewables, as also Rajat pointed out, and EV manufacturing. So these are the ones which we are seeing from a demand perspective. The traditional ones, which is another specialty steel or something, those all will come later. But that also, from a manufacturing perspective, yes, they will attract investment. But from our domain, our area perspective, where you could find a demand in the logistics and the industrial park, we're not talking of those large, heavy scale industries. We are mainly talking about assemblies and light engineering, etc., etc. So they will come, but to expect a huge amount of demand coming in because of people moving away from China, I think that the effect to India will come, but it will be not so much as some other countries might get, which have a better manufacturing setup like Vietnam, Indonesia, etc., etc. So it will come, but particularly some countries have announced, like Japan or Singapore or South Korea, that they have announced maybe they will completely move away over a period of time, or they will have China plus one. So we might get benefit of some of that China plus one. Whether we will be a major beneficiary, I do not think so.
I just sorry for interjecting. I just say I actually think it's a little bit of an opportunity lost for all of us by the Indian government. I don't think we did enough in the last couple of years to incentivize the manufacturers to move in. Otherwise, why would you see such a large-scale movement into Vietnam and not in India? But that's what's happened.
So, Rajat, I would actually not blame it to just the last 2 years, what the government has not done proactively. There are many things, the base itself from many perspectives, whether you call it the whole delay which happens in the permits or the land acquisition or, the labor laws. There are many. So as a base which those countries have developed over a, more investor friendly kind of a setup, that happens over ages. So government is trying that, mere tax incentive or, export incentive or capital subsidy or something like that. They've been there in the past, but, not so much beneficial. At least the government has moved the shift away from, capital investment linked to production linked, output linked, from an input link to output link. So that is something which is driving. We will see that, things coming down. What might also be a greater driver of manufacturing would be, our own internal demand. And some of the inputs that we were perhaps importing, maybe, you start creating domestically itself. The various international companies like Apple, through its, multiple companies, manufacturing tablets here, of manufacturing, mobiles, etc., of assembly, that is probably significantly because of domestic demand, not necessarily for, exporting purposes. So domestic demand, some effect of the China plus one or reshoring, or some areas in like electronic, pharmaceutical is one another, which will, or a revival of textile. So these are the areas which will actually drive the manufacturing aspects in India.
Yes, Mr. Narayan, thanks for this. Yash, coming to you, and before I go to Rajni, so I think one aspect, yes, we covered about the manufacturing shift, whether we talk about our pharma prowess or government policies or renewables. If we go beyond manufacturing, right, and purely from the driver for logistics and warehousing business, something like cold chains, right? So it has a different dynamics. Or we were in the previous panel we were discussing about a half an hour or a 1 hour delivery. So which gives rise to in city or a very close knit in freshness centers. So, any thoughts, around that, the new evolving model and how this gonna drive the, overall demand?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Piyush, maybe I'll spend a minute just going back to the last point and then come back to this one, right? So, I mean, first of all, I completely echo Rajat and RK's points, right, on manufacturing demand and potentially the growth of that in India. So I think when you look at transferring some of that demand from China, so it's a very structural change on both sides, right? Both for companies who are looking to either migrate manufacturing bases from China, or whether they are looking to implement sort of a China plus one kind of a formula. So while we've obviously heard a lot of talk around that, I don't think we've seen much of that really happening on the ground, right? And I won't expect that to happen anytime soon, because these are structural changes which take time. And if we've learned anything for India over sort of our investing careers, it's that stuff takes time, right? So I don't think this is something which is going to change from a short to mid-term perspective for sure. Both on the China side, where people are evaluating moving their investments into India or other countries, or from an India perspective, where some of the points which Rajat and RK mentioned, where honestly, I think we do need to sort of clean up our act and provide a better enabling infrastructure, whether it is on land acquisition, approvals, labor laws, etc., right? So I do believe that over the short to mid-term for sure, the sector demand will really come more from consumption-linked demand, right? Where you see 3PL and e-commerce being sort of the lion's share of demand at probably 50 to 60% or even more, right? And manufacturing and everything else being slightly lesser. But that said, hopefully over the longer term, hopefully India is able to sort of get its act together, in terms of all of these things, land acquisition, approvals, labor, so that we are able to attract a larger part of that demand going forward, right? But so I'm personally hopeful that at least longer term, we should see a meaningful part of that manufacturing demand coming into India as well.
Yeah.
Moving to your question on sort of cold chain and other sort of avenues for growth, right? So I think cold chain particularly, my view is that there is definitely a lot of demand, right, across cold chain in general. But again, you have to sort of break it up into a couple of different buckets, right? So when you talk about cold chain, one bucket is sort of temperature controlled warehousing, and the other is really your, zero, sub-zero kind of chilled warehousing. Now, the latter is something which is probably very high value, where margins currently look great. But the problem with that is that you're really not able to achieve a lot of scale, right? So the target segment, which is really able to utilize that, primarily is made up of, meat, fish, pharma, a couple of, higher end frozen food items, etc., is not a very large base. While it pays very well, I think it's really difficult to see scale there, and I don't think that's going to change for some time. The other end of the market, which is your temperature controlled, is now becoming a large market, right? So earlier, that was primarily unorganized, with very few or no organized players really into that space at all. Now that's obviously changing with the corporatization of food chain, grocery, etc. Plus you have a lot of these online or tech-enabled players getting into that space as well. So again, I think what we will really see short to mid-term is we will see the temperature controlled warehousing demand increasing meaningfully, and probably less so for the zero or sub-zero kind of cold chain warehousing.
Interesting, Yash. Rajni, coming to you, your maybe incremental thoughts, on both the newer emerging trends, for warehousing, and also the shift which we spoke about, from China or elsewhere to India.
Thank you, Piyush, for the question, and a very good afternoon to everyone. So I agree with what my fellow panelists said just now. If we look at this move of manufacturing from China that we've been talking about, uh, let's first get China's position on this clear. Like China contributes around 28% to global industrial production. That's huge. India's share is something around 3%. So there's a reason why all these manufacturing units are in China, be it economies of scale that China offers, infrastructure, availability of skilled labor. So it's not going to be all that easy to move manufacturing from China to India. And then what we have discussed is that there are businesses talking about reducing the exposure to China, but then there India is competing with many smaller countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, Thailand. And here it's interesting to know, Rajat was talking about why is it that a lot of manufacturing is moving to Vietnam and not India. So I think one place where India is losing out to these smaller countries is integration in the global supply chain. So that is where Vietnam has an edge. Vietnam has just got into all the correct trade agreements. So if you see, Vietnam has trade agreements with all the major consuming big developed countries. That is where India has been kind of, trailing. But then India also has to be very careful about getting into trade agreements because we ourselves have a huge consumption market. So, that's the reason why India pulled out of RCEP, because we can't risk exposing our market because many other global players would be interested in our market. Having said that, it's not that nothing has been happening in India. I would say this production-linked incentive scheme that the government has come out with is a step in the right direction, and we are seeing a lot of interest in that. Infrastructure also, things are happening. If we look at ease of doing business, which is a big concern with global players, that also in the last 1 year, we have moved up some 16 in the terms of ranking, but we are still ranked at some 68, 69 level. So there's a lot that needs to be done on both ease of doing business front as well as infrastructure front before we start seeing a meaningful move in manufacturing sector to India. So yes, some last 1 year or so, there has been some movement, but like we've been discussing, nothing very significant. So that's my view on manufacturing shift. Talking about what trends in warehousing and what's going to drive the growth here, I would say that technology adoption is one thing which will become very critical going forward. Because right now, if we look at the warehousing segment, the adoption of technology is still very low compared to developed countries. And now when we're talking about, institutionalization of this segment happening, we're talking about moving from grade B to grade A, penetration of e-commerce increasing. I think, and this whole conversation about same-day delivery and all that, that would require a much faster adoption of technology than what we've seen so far. And I think that's where a lot is going to happen going forward.
Thanks, Rajni. I think it's an interesting point which you brought out on technology, and which leads to doing a value add from an operations perspective. Now, whether we talk about robots or augmented reality technology, so this is clearly enabling business to regulate warehouses even in remote locations. So which gives rise to more absolute efficiency and have a much penetrated reach into the hinterland, whether we talk about tier 2, tier 3, or even tier 4 cities. So from that perspective, maybe Rajat, your views is twofold. One is technology one among the key value add which the operator is now bringing in to the table, and which also relates to the point of having a deeper penetration because of the strong technology network.
Right. So I think developers, I like to call ourselves more as developers and fund managers and operators. I think developers and operators, whether they like it or not, I think they need to focus on technology. Warehouse as such is a fairly standardized product as compared to, let's say, shopping centers or hotels, which are very design heavy. How do you differentiate? As ESR, when we enter the market, we come up with, let's say, certain overheads, we make a certain standardized product which needs to be marketed at a certain price. And for us, one of the big differentiators is technology. We actually have something called an ESR India Smart App, which, just to give you little examples, it monitors movements of every truck that enters the facility. It tells the chauffeur where to park, small things like where should the goods be unloaded, where should the goods be loaded into. It gives them, if it's a larger park of, let's say, a couple of 100 acres, it tells the driver exactly where that particular warehouse is. I mean, it's one example of what the smart app does. So a lot of, let's say, features that independently sound tiny, but together add up to drive up, I'd say operational efficiencies for all tenants, whether it's manufacturing or e-commerce or retail who operate from our facilities, is very, very important. I mean, I think these are some of the things that increasingly we'd see everyone expecting. I think for now, the market's pretty small. 20% of tenants expected, 70-80% are fairly ambivalent about it. But I see in the next 2-3 years, you'd see at least 50% of tenants differentiating between locating A warehouse as compared to B, depending on the amount of technological support they get in these facilities.
Thanks, Rajat. So Yash, coming to you, so technology may be one of the more important drivers for moving to more micro locations. But do you think the more demand, either because of availability of land, demand, and technology, is more we are seeing now in not even tier 2, but tier 3, tier 4, even tier 5 cities?
Yeah, so Piyush, I think my view is that we really won't see a lot of the tech rollout with respect to tier 3, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, right? And like Rajat mentioned, I think tech is definitely important where, all of us want to be able to use that as a differentiating factor where we are, trying to use sort of cutting edge technology to that extent for park management, where we are able to offer a much more seamless experience and better efficiency, better throughput for our tenants. Right. So, I mean, that's definitely a big part of what we do as well. And I would think a lot of the other serious players in the market would also be looking at implementing similar solutions. But that said, I mean, when most of us think about warehousing technology, I mean, we're thinking about, robots moving about inside the warehouse, picking, sorting, that sort of stuff. So I think, when you look at that end of technology, the investments and initiatives on that side are primarily still being done by tenants, right? So for instance, someone like an Amazon obviously brings in a lot of technology into its warehouses. I think technology becomes even more important, when you start looking at in-city warehousing, right? And there it is just not something which is nice to have, but it is a necessity. Right, because that's the only way to sort of deal with the higher price of real estate in city is to sort of increase density, right? And having these sort of automatic, stacking systems, sorting systems, retrieval systems, etc., for goods and products is one way to improve density, improve throughput, which becomes an absolute necessity when you're talking about city center real estate, where you need to deliver maximum bang for the buck, right? So I think increasingly, I mean, if you look at sort of other examples regionally or globally, you have a lot of these prop tech startups which are really focusing on this segment, where they're basically implementing technology solutions for in-city warehousing, right? Where you can really ramp up the density of a in-city warehouse by like 5-10x compared to what you'd otherwise be able to do operating it as a traditional warehouse.
Yeah, I just like to add to that. Overall, we think in-city is going to be massive. I think India is a place where in-city warehousing hasn't yet picked up at all. I mean, I don't know of a single modern, large-scale institutional developed in-city facility in India. We're very, very actively looking into that segment. We've had very successful experiences in APAC outside of India. China, Singapore, Japan, we built in-city warehousing, created, let's say, almost like a new product asset class in the market and being good at it. So we're trying to do that in India right now. I think the real challenge remains land. Getting land in city, you're basically competing with office, you're competing with retail, you're competing with residential. Can you get the same price, same capital values as those asset classes? That's tough, right? So that's the key challenge. But from a demand perspective, if you speak to I'd say everyone from the morning guy who delivers grocery to your place to the Amazons or Flipkarts of the world, there is massive demand for in-city. It's on us now. I think the ball's really in our court as developers on how do we think we can serve that with the right product, right technology, right size. And I'm pretty hopeful in the next 24 to 48 months, let's say 2 to 4 years, you'd see in-city warehouses practically in all tier 1 cities in India. Tier 2, as Yash also indicated, I think in-city will take a little bit of time. tier 2 for us is, I think, largely right now just a pure play on consumption. Fact is that any adolescent kid sitting in any, let's say, far east, far northeastern town or the hinterland in the central India is still very keen to buy fashion, is still very keen to buy goods that aren't easily available in those places. And online is their only option, with or without COVID. I mean, to me, COVID is still short term. I'm an optimistic guy. I keep telling myself COVID is another 6-month story. But the overall change in customer behavior is not going to change.
Yeah.
They do want goods sitting in their homes within a day. And hence we see massive demand for large scale, fulfillment centers, sort centers, warehouses in tier 2 cities.
And you mentioned about in-city, warehouses. So possibly we might even see vertical, warehouses because
needs to be vertical. Yeah, absolutely. If you're looking at, let's say, anywhere between 4 to 8 story warehouses, that's the only way you can, make it efficient.
On this note, Mr. Narayan, from your perspective, any further thoughts on, getting more operating, efficiencies? We spoke about technology and, other things. Anything which you want to add on from your experience?
No, I think Rajat pretty much said it that most, and Yash also referred to it. Most of the technology inside a logistic park is more as part of the warehouse management system of the tenants, of what they do inside, and bring in their own efficiency, better utilization on a cubic feet basis, better utilization on a throughput basis. When it comes to express logistics, there is no cubic feet, but there is increasing throughput. In and out, how quickly they can do the turnaround. So it's more on them, but as developer, to the extent that we can support, we do that, which party Rajat also mentioned too, and trying to reduce their operating cost by bringing in solar energy, by bringing in, whatever other system, and also trying to give them a continuous power. I mean, that continuous power is a big time requirement of theirs. At some places we incur high cost, at some places we incur, manageable cost. So that's what one would tend to do as a developer. So from how to reduce their operating costs, that's the key goal, and how we use technology for that. Also our maintenance cost, our preventive maintenance cost, proactive maintenance, those are the aspects. So to the extent we can put in smart devices in some of the, the major component of any commercial asset cost is the AHU cost, is the energy cost. Entire AHU, the entire elevator system is all missing in the warehouse. So it is the most sophisticated element that we have is, you can say it's a solar, but that's also once established, it's a 25-year asset with minimum maintenance. Then you've got that, STP, which is what, which is also not a sophisticated item as such, it's just a regular maintenance item. So not much from that perspective, but whatever smart devices one could put for water usage, for electricity usage, monitoring, for the traffic movement, for people movement. Those are the kind of things that we do to try and reduce our own operating costs and the CAM cost. And yes, on the development side, yes, of course, now more and more remote project management, monitoring, which is happening thanks to new technologies coming in. So you have people at the site and you can do monitoring offshore, away also. So we try to bring in efficiencies in the development also.
Thanks, Mr. Narayan. Rajini, Yash and Rajat both mentioned this point that now the habits of people have changed, right? Whether we talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, people want to consume the way they have been consuming and shopping in last 12 to 18 months time. So the demand pattern is possibly what we were seeing only in tier 1 and tier 2 is clearly going in tier 3, tier 4, or even lower cities in the similar trajectory. So yes, there are some infra challenges which is anyways getting addressed in separate form, but technology penetration has definitely happened. So from a penetration perspective, in the hinterland, your thoughts, what kind of trends you see, emerging, maybe on a more geographical perspective, east, west, or otherwise, and also how fast do you think the penetration actually will happen, in cities beyond tier 2?
Piyush, if we look at the population, large chunk of India's population is in these tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities. And people there have aspirations. They are looking at what is being consumed in tier 1 cities and they want the same products. And this technology penetration has made that possible. And I would say, while if you look at e-commerce penetration, before the pandemic, the penetration was around 5% in India. It was anyways increasing, but I feel this pandemic has given a further strong boost to e-commerce penetration. Because a lot of people who were on the fences and now they've made that move to online shopping, they will stay because they have seen the comfort of that. So I think technology, this e-commerce penetration is going to be very sharp in India. We do not have the data I do not have the data of what happened to e-commerce penetration in this pandemic year. But say for a developed market like UK, I was looking at the data and I saw that e-commerce penetration jumped up from some 20% to 30-35%, which is a huge jump. So I think in India also this whole possibility is there. And as I said, the aspirations are there. So, and in fact, if you look at what has been happening, if we look at the data so far, even in terms of warehousing demand, the last 2 years, as per the data that we have, the warehousing transactions, in FY21, for the top 8 cities, we saw the transactions contracting by some 20-21%. In FY20 also, we saw for the top 8 cities, the warehousing transactions contracting. But the basket of these smaller cities, 12, 13 cities that we track, we saw that last 2 years, they have been recording good positive growth of above 20%. I agree, this is on a low base. But what I'm trying to reiterate that there is huge potential of growth in these segments because the aspirations are there. India is a consumption-driven economy, and once they have access to these products, there is no stopping the consumption.
Yeah, Rajni, absolutely, and hence the investment trajectory. We are seeing it in last 4 years. The way it's on a upscale. So if at all we shift our discussion, more to capital investments and how our international investors and platforms, looking at this. And I think so one point, which we need to discuss is the long-term sustainability, of returns. So if if at all we compare this with office, now the industry is at least more than 15-year-old, in a large section, possibly we have seen some sustainability of, returns and the assets. From warehousing perspective, maybe it's a relatively, newer. So if at all, maybe Rajat, your thoughts that a specific yield and the quality of assets, how are the investors looking at the investors to continue giving the assets, continue to give those returns from a long-term perspective?
Right. So I'd say there are two sets of investors right now in the market. I'm limiting my sample set to institutional investors, keeping domestic HNI money aside. There are institutional investors who look at this as a 3 to 5 year reallocation of capital. People who think they're underweight right now on logistics. They want to allocate a lot more capital from office, from retail, from student housing into logistics, and think that this is the right time to enter. We do a 5-year play. Let's say enter at a 9% yield, exit at a 7% yield, get some capital back. And then there are real long-term patient investors who I'd say are more appreciative and understanding of the India story. Yash very aptly said things take time in India, but things do happen. And that's what we've seen in equity markets and office market in the last decade and a half. So our view is both the investors stand to make money here. It is a very competitive market. Land acquisition is, as difficult as doing anything else. I don't think buying land in India is, let's say any less difficult than perhaps creating rockets. We've just seen a lot of news last week and I'm just getting inspired by that. So land acquisition remains extremely, extremely difficult. Tier 1, Tier 2, in city, outside city, it remains a challenge day in and day out. I'm sure Arki and Yash understand where I'm coming from. And keeping that in mind, I think what we've been essentially communicating to investors over the last couple of years is it's almost a little, I'd say unfair or perhaps, inept to compare forecast returns from logistics to office and retail. To us, office and retail are a lot more cyclical. To us, logistics is a very high volume, integrated network creation, relatively lower risk, medium return play, right? So you need patient capital who understands that story. Can you frankly, hand on heart, make 25% returns in logistics today in India over a 5-year period? I don't think so. I think you can see Excel spreadsheets floating around promising 25% returns, but I'd be super surprised if, someone can spin that magic. I think this is really a mid-teens, return on equity sort of a play. Yields right now are anywhere between 8 to 10%, depending on markets you operate in, the efficiencies you have, as individual developers. And I don't think those are going to change. I think the band is going to remain at 8.5 to 10% perhaps. You need to figure out, which end of that band do you want to play in as a market participant. And possible return on equity is essentially the yield plus growth, right? So I think growth would be very, very similar to how I see long-term inflation in India. Right now, inflation is high. We've seen periods of low inflation, but over a longer term, I think 3 to 5% CAGR is what we are looking at. So you enter at 8-10%, you play a 3 to 5% CAGR play, you benefit a little from leverage. Fortunately for us, leverage costs have come down in the last year and a half. All in all, it becomes, as I said, it's like a 14-15% return on equity sort of a play, give or take 100 to 200 basis points. And we need patient capital who understands that. I think us at ESR are fortunate. We've had, let's say, proof of concept in other countries, and hence we have capital backers who understand that if you're patient enough for 7 to 10 years in India, and given logistics is a lot more stable as compared to some of the other competing real estate asset classes, we can make that mid-teens return with the right discipline.
Thanks, Rajat. Yash, your perspective, and given the fact that you all have raised capital, and both from institutional as well as even retail, right? So how are you seeing the investors, on both the sides looking at this play?
Yeah, so Piyush, I think, look, whether you're raising capital from institutions or even, local HNI family office money, as we've done, I think the expectation of returns from real estate development continues to be sort of in the vicinity of 20%, right? Like Rajat said, I think, that's getting harder to achieve. And I think the main reason for that is really, we've always seen in India, land prices sort of tend to run ahead of themselves, right? So while, yes, we're still able to, probably underwrite entry yields at, between, let's say, 9 and 10%, so that by the time we are exiting the asset, we've, baked in a couple of escalations and we're in the vicinity of 10. And we're looking at, hopefully exit cap rates, which are, in the vicinity of 8, right? And if you're able to do all of that within sort of a 3-ish year time frame, you will pencil into that 20% sort of return, at least on Excel. Right? Now, I think there are a couple of aspects to this. Like I said, yes, those returns are getting harder to underwrite. 2 reasons. Land prices are sort of running ahead of themselves. So really, we're finding it difficult to acquire land in the locations tenant want at the kind of pricing which would make sense for these deals, right? The second thing is also that, if you look at the specification of the warehouse box, that's actually undergone a lot of change over the last couple of years, right? So, a couple of years ago, you would probably build these boxes at, 12, 13, 1400 bucks. But now, if you look at the spec which, any of these grade A tenants want, you're looking at easily, north of 1900. If you look at some of the e-com players, you'll be north of 2000, right? So I think that certainly, makes it that much harder to sort of then meet those underwritten returns. That said, I think a good thing for this sector is that, if you look at it now, probably if I had to guesstimate a number, 80% of the capital which is chasing this sector is now institutional, right? So beyond the point, all of the LPs for, most of the developers or managers in this segment are, foreign institutional capital or, institutional capital of some sort, where they are looking at, when they are again looking at development in India, they are looking at that sort of, 20% or at least 18 to 20% type of IRRs on your underwriting, right? So I think the fact that most players are utilizing a similar flavor of capital, and this is one of the requirements of that flavor of capital where you need to be underwriting to these returns. Hopefully that might keep the market in check, where, beyond a point, people will just not be able to do deals which don't match up to these returns, right? So I think, and then long term, we will see yields probably moving down over time, right? But then also we will see sort of risk moving down over time, right? Where over the next couple of years, this will become a much more mature sector, which has been able to deliver, in terms of returns and in terms of this thesis, where people are then comfortable sort of attaching a lower weightage to that development risk or India risk, or whichever way you want to look at it, right? Where we are then able to underwrite to somewhat lower returns than what we are targeting today.
So just to budge in in the last couple of years, yes, rents haven't gone up like everyone expected. I think the growth, let's just say the growth from 2017 to 19 hasn't yet happened again between 2019 to 21. But again, I think you need to keep looking at the long-term picture, right? I mean, that's how our thesis at ESR is. If you look at developed market, okay, we can take examples of Australia, we can take examples of the United States, we can take examples of UK, and you just simply compare CBD office rents to industrial rents outside cities, and you do a ratio analysis. I think it's typically about 1:4, 1:5. If you see, let's say, rents for warehouses on outskirts of Delhi and Bombay and Bangalore, the three largest cities in India, to office CBD rents, I think that ratio is really on an average 1:10. So there's a lot of, let's say, potential for rents to increase. What needs to happen though is, I think, why is it that these ratios are worse off in India? It's just infrastructure. The difference in quality of infrastructure between a CBD location, you look at a BKC in Bombay vis-a-vis a Bhiwandi in Bombay, is right now massive, right? If governments and private participants can together figure out ways to bridge that infrastructure gap, there is no reason why that ratio cannot crunch from 1:10 to 1:5, 1:7.
Yeah, but Rajat, only the other point is the return expectations between an office and a warehousing. It kind of move in the same direction. Like a 20% development risk, on operating yield perspective, maybe 8.5 to 9.5%, and maybe return on equity maybe around 13-14%. So they tend to flock together. But here the challenge is the scalability and the options, to invest. Today, if an investor wants to partner and put about $100 million, you have very limited options, or I would say none.
That's right.
So from that perspective, maybe
I just like to add to that.
Sure.
What you said. So maybe return expectation, I mean, as you mentioned, maybe the same, but remember that we're talking of different risk elements in both, right? In terms of
so important.
etc. is very different in office, particularly what you have seen in the last 2 years, right? Versus in the industrial. So industrial is more stabilized assets, I would say, and therefore the return expectation also accordingly moves in tandem with the risk elements of it. Point number 2, I may want a much higher development yield on office asset than on a warehousing asset, for the simple reason that the development risk per se is not so much. It's a very short cycle development, that you have to do, and there's no uncertainty of 3 years, 4 years kind of a development risk that you have there. Also, in terms of scalability, opportunity, etc., I would say still is there long time. I won't be, the previous discussion was very much on a cautious note. The last 10 minutes of the previous panel discussion which happened, they were pretty much cautious, but I think we will remain significantly, optimistic at this point of time. Just a simple data point. I was reading a CBRE report of what is the scale and size and absorption that's happening in the US market. Fine, we may be far away from the US market, but even at current mature situation of those markets, in the December quarter and in the March quarter, they have done in the December quarter, they have done 130 million square feet of absorption, and in the March quarter, they have done 116 million square feet. We are still talking of 30 to 40 million on an annual basis, right, for the entire country on a grade A office, grade A industrial. So
logistics,
and there also significantly the driving, the driving factor has been e-commerce. You would tend to expect that penetration there, etc., would be higher. But driving factor was still e-commerce largely, and some manufacturing which is coming back. So we still have a lot of penetration to achieve on the e-commerce side. So I think this demand aspect will remain. It is more for us as to how we can execute, and which is primarily boiling down to the point of where to find land. In terms of growth, it will still be greenfield as opposed to acquisition. maybe 5 years down the line, growth of any single player would be a combination of acquisition and development. But right now, it's largely development still.
Yes, and since you mentioned about scalability, I think we'll just add one more point is on the exit. And the clear transition comes to REIT. So in office that is well established now, right? Maybe on the industrial side we are yet to see in India. So if at all we have a good example of an industrial REIT or any of the warehousing assets moving to an existing REIT, possibly that could demonstrate a better exit and also some kind of a cap rate compression being exhibited. So on that note, maybe Rajni, you have any thoughts on the possibility of industrial REIT coming to India soon?
Piyush, I feel that warehousing in India is still at a very nascent stage. So I would see right now it would take another, I would say, 3 to 5 years before we reach the stage where the PE players are able to reach that scale where a REIT would be possible. And once they have seen that one full cycle of rent escalation with completed projects, then the market would be ready for it. I think right now it's not at that stage. It would take another 3 to 5 years before we see industrial REIT coming into the market.
Rajat and Yash, maybe your words on that. What kind of exit would these investors look at? Is it?
I'd say I'm a little more bullish than what Rajni just said. I actually think both sort of exits. A lot of developers, a lot of investors want these 20%, or as I'd like to believe more 16 to 18% post-tax returns. And then there are developers who are super scared of land acquisition and development risk in India. They want to focus their capital, let's say pension funds, insurance funds, on long-term core asset ownership. So we've got both these pools of capital, and you'd see a lot of shift from development pool to core in the next 3-4 years, which is one form of exit. But the larger play, I'm very, fundamentally, let's say, confident is going to be REITs. I think we've got three office REITs right now trading anywhere between 6.5% to 8% yields. If there were to be hypothetically industrial listed REIT today, and given we're in the middle of the pandemic, given there are different driving forces, it's a relatively a lower risk market. I think an industrial REIT can trade at anywhere between 75 to as much as about 125 basis point premium to an office. I mean, when I say premium, 8% effectively means, industrial should be 7%. Keeping that, thesis in mind, I think next 3 to 4 years, you will see, in my belief is, you will see at least 2 large real estate investment trusts, or I think as infrastructure players, I'd like to call myself an InvIT rather than REIT. Technically speaking, we see 2 large industrial InvITs in the next 3 to 4 years. I think the challenge is that REITs and InvITs need to have a certain minimum volume, and industrial rents are obviously lower. For an industrial REIT to make sense, you need to have a lease portfolio of what my calculation suggests a minimum of 25-30 million square feet.
Yes.
I think, and none of the organized players in India, none of the players in India right now are close to that, sort of scale. I think the largest player is perhaps, I'd say about 50% of that scale. Of all of us, others are trying to catch up. But in the next 3-4 years, I think whether it's ESR ourselves or some of our competition, I think you will see REITs. REITs is a very, very tax efficient exit mechanism in our view. Given the current incentives offered by the Indian government, gives you an opportunity to retain ownership over the longer run. And I'd not be surprised if everyone who's looking to scale up their portfolios to, let's say, at least a minimum of 10-15 million square feet starts, planning REITs, way in advance. I mean, we'd see, I think some of the larger developers should start planning in REITs as we, let's say, as soon as about next 12-18 months, we should see, more activity in that space.
Thanks, Rajat. Yash, your word, since you have recently raised capital, and what kind of exit investors have looked at?
Yeah, no, so I think I agree with Rajat, right, that we will see, and sort of what Rajni said as well, except that I'd be sort of at the shorter end of that 3 to 5 year tenure, right? So, I mean, one, industrial REITs or logistics REITs are already, fairly common when you look at, broader Asian markets or global markets, right? So, I mean, as a product, it's not like we're trying to do something new or pioneering, right? So this already exists as a product regionally and globally. The benefit, when we look at, when some of us sort of started investing into real estate, I started my career in real estate investing in 2007. We were sort of thinking about, office or any other commercial real estate asset class which are yielding in the same way, where we were thinking that, over the next 4 or 5 years, we may potentially look at REITs as an exit. Right now, that obviously took longer than what we imagined. We've only seen REITs sort of coming into the mainstay fairly recently compared to that. But when we look at industrial now, we have two large advantages. That one, as a market, we are significantly much more matured than what we were back then, right? So compared to office or other asset classes, warehousing or logistics as an asset class has the benefit of coming into being into a more matured market, right? So to that extent, it can sort of evolve to that level faster. And then also, when you think about the development cycle for logistics, it's much shorter than what you would have for commercial office, retail, or any other commercial real estate asset class, right? So I do think we will get there sooner than later. In my mind, 3 to 4 years, we should certainly have like Rajat said, industrial and logistics focus in India. And in the meantime, I think there will be ample liquidity for anyone who wants to sell assets in the market, where you will have, other fund managers looking to buy these assets, or other private equity managers looking to consolidate assets, with the eventual play that, they would ultimately create a portfolio, which then, they would subsequently read.
Thanks, Yash. I think so. We have completely, overshot time. I think thanks to all the co-speakers. I'll just, pen down a few points, which we discussed. I think that we are clearly seeing a thrust coming, from international manufacturers to India, but it's a slow process, as possibly happens in any kind of, economic and political wars from China to India. The warehousing demand is more consumption linked. We might definitely see newer concepts of in-city, warehouses, vertical warehouses, temperature controlled, cold storages. Capital is available. There are big checks available for warehousing, and definitely we are seeing a penetration going in tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 cities, because the consumption pattern, which has now struck in from the COVID time, is likely to continue. And REITs will soon be a reality. Yes, we will need scale, and the way platforms are being built, we will soon see that happening in maybe 3 to 5 years' time. With that, thanks so much. Sapna, to you, please.